Hey everyone, so today we are going to discuss about the lateral view of the skull. So here you can see over here the lateral view of the skull, and so what basic structures make the lateral view of the skull? The lateral view of the skull, यहाँ पर हम देखें तो first of all जो आपको चीज़ नज़र आती है that's this frontal bone over here. ये frontal bone नज़र आ रही है. Then you can see this parietal bone over here, and then you can see this occipital bone. So these three bones you can see here, and frontal bone then parietal bone के साथ suture बनाता है, ठीक है, coronal suture के through, and parietal second parietal के साथ suture बनाता है through the sagittal suture, and occipital के पास साथ जो बनाता है that is through the lambdoid suture. इसके बाद then these also form a suture with the squamous part of the temporal bone, और ये होता है squamous suture. Now ये तो वो सारी चीज़ें थी जो आपको vault of the skull में नज़र आ रही थी and the lateral side. उसके बाद next आपको जो side of the skull में कौन कौन सी चीज़ें नज़र आ रही हैं side of the skull. So which things you can see here? So first of all आपको नज़र आ रहा है this whole temporal bone over here, temporal bone and its parts. So first of all we have the parts of the temporal bone. So which parts you can see here? This is the squamous part, then this is the mastoid process, this is the styloid process, and this is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. And you can also see this external acoustic meatus over here. So these are the parts of the temporal bone. Then you can see this squamous part of the occipital bone over here, squamous part of occipital bone, and then finally what you can see here is a greater wing of the sphenoid. So greater wing of sphenoid. So let's revise again. First of all, superiorly क्या क्या चीज़ें नज़र आ रही थी? सबसे पहले you see the frontal bone over here, then you see these parietal bones, then the occipital bones. These form the vault of the skull, and the lateral side you can see these. Then on the side of the skull you can see this temporal bone and its parts. Then you can see this squamous part of the occipital bone and the greater wing of the sphenoid. Okay, उसके बाद जैसे ही आप नीचे आते हैं, so you can see here this bone over here, this huge bone. So what's this bone called? This is the mandible over here, and this is its ramus. So इस तरह. So superiorly you see these bones, then on the side of the skull you see these bones, and on the inferior aspect you see the ramus and the mandible. So these was all. Okay, now there is an important point on the lateral view of the skull here. Here what you can see, let me use another color here. Yes. So here where all these sutures meet, this is the thinnest part of the lateral side of the skull and known as the pterion. और इसकी importance ये है कि it overlies the anterior division of the middle meningeal artery and the vein. So this basically overlies the anterior division of middle meningeal artery and vein. उसके बाद you can see here over here you see the frontal bone, and this process over here, this is known as the zygomatic process of the frontal bone, because this one is the zygomatic bone, so this will be the zygomatic process of the frontal bone. So from here, from the posterior margin of this zygomatic process, beginning as a single line, these become the superior temporal line and the inferior temporal line. So these lines you can see prominence on the skull figure also. Now below the inferior temporal line, this whole fossa over here, this is known as the temporal fossa. Temporal fossa. And below the temporal fossa here, if you remove deep to this ramus over here, there is an infratemporal fossa. Now there are some important fissures and important fossas over here that you need to keep in mind. Now first one is this infratemporal fossa. Infratemporal fossa. Then there is a pterygomaxillary fissure. Then there is a pterygopalatine fossa, and there is an infraorbital fissure. Now here you cannot see it clearly, but if you remove this ramus over here and if you view it in a 3D mode, you will see that in between the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone, and like if you see this is the posterior margin of the maxilla and this is the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid. So above it you can see here there's a fissure that's known as the pterygomaxillary fissure. So here is the infratemporal fossa, this is the pterygomaxillary fissure, and from here it connects the infratemporal fossa to the pterygopalatine fossa. So what you got to know here was that here is the infratemporal fossa, then here is the pterygomaxillary fissure, which is in between the posterior margin of the maxilla and the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid, and this fissure ultimately leads to this pterygopalatine fossa. So this 1, 2 and 3. So which was one? Infratemporal fossa, second is the pterygomaxillary fissure, and third one is the pterygopalatine fossa. Now what's the infraorbital fissure? So infraorbital fissure is another fissure that's also here in the there's also a horizontal opening between the greater wing of the sphenoid and the maxilla. There is a horizontal opening and that basically opens here into this orbit. So if you view the anterior view of the orbit, you can see this infraorbital fissure clearly. So this was whole about the lateral view of the skull. In these we studied what the skull is made up of on the lateral side. Let me review a bit. So first we studied how it's made superiorly, then we saw the side of the skull, and then we viewed it inferiorly. Then we studied about some important lines that were the superior and inferior temporal lines. Then we studied about the pterion, what's pterion versus clinical importance. Then we studied about some fossa, including this temporal fossa and infratemporal fossa and the pterygopalatine fossa, and then some fissures that connect the respective fossas. So this is a whole review about this whole lecture, and let me know if you don't understand anything here. I'll just look into it and let me know in the comments which part over here I'm missing, and I'll just cover it in the next lecture. So till then, subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon, like and share. So thank you everyone. Till then, Allah Hafiz.